I never built my cabin to be part of anyone's plan. Tucked deep in the Blue Ridge foothills, it was my escape. From traffic, from meetings, from the noise. I was a structural engineer for 30 years, spent most of it solving other people's problems. The cabin was for me. 32 acres of solitude, wild pines, and a private road that wound through my lower field. Before reaching a single-lane wooden bridge I'd built myself. Beyond that bridge, the rest of the world, for the first in 5 years, it stayed quiet. Then came the developers. They called it Whispering Pines, a planned community of faux rustic homes, slapped onto cleared hillsides like frosting on boxed cake. The marketing promised serenity, security, and mountain charm. What they didn't mention was the Homeowners Association, an entity with more rules than a military base, and a thirst for control that bordered on religious. I ignored it at first. My land predated their subdivision. Legally, they had no authority over me. Still, they sent pamphlets, invitations to neighborly events. Then came the letters, requests to standardize my driveway, repaint my cabin to match the natural tones of the community. I tossed them all. Then Sheila Carrington introduced herself. She showed up on my porch one fall afternoon. Perfect hair, bright white SUV, parked at the end of my drive like it was scared to touch gravel. She wore a windbreaker embroidered with the HOA's name and carried a clipboard thick with forms. "I'm sure you want to be a good neighbor," she said, smiling like a real estate billboard. "We're just asking for consistency. Uniformity maintains property value." "I'm not one of your properties," I replied. She stiffened. "Well, we hope to have your cooperation moving forward." That was the first visit. The second came 2 weeks later after I installed a new solar array. Unsightly was the word she used. Technically, outside regulation. "Technically," I said. "You're trespassing." Her smile faltered. I thought that would be the end of it, but Sheila was the kind of person who didn't stop until she got the last word, or crushed the person who tried to get it first. Month later, I returned from a supply run to find a line of boulders, massive, jagged things, blocking my gravel road just past the tree line, dumped overnight, perfectly spaced, impossible to drive around. A bright orange sign staked in the dirt read, "Private access, closed by HOA order. Trespassers will be reported." For a moment, I just stood there, engine idling, jaw clenched. They'd taken the only road I used to reach the county highway. I'd let them hike through my property, let their kids fish in my creek. But now, out of spite or strategy, they'd boxed me in. I parked and walked the rest of the way to the bridge. The creek below hissed over polished stone, cold and clear as always. On the other side, their perfect little world stretched like a brochure. Manicured lawns, matching porch swings, motion-sensing lights that blinked even in daylight, all accessible only through the bridge I'd built, the bridge that stood on my land. They'd forgotten something. The road they blocked, that was an easement granted by me, not them. And the bridge they crossed every single day, that was mine, too. Materials bought with my own money, blueprints drawn by my own hand. No deed, no agreement, no legal claim gave them the right to it. I had simply allowed it, out of neighborly decency. But decency has limits. By sundown, I had a plan, not out of revenge. At least that's what I told myself, but out of necessity. If they could play games with roads, then it was time they remembered who held the keys to the only lifeline they had. I walked the bridge slowly that night, running my hand along the oak beams, testing each steel bolt, still solid, still mine. By morning, it would have a lock they couldn't cut, a gate they couldn't pass, and a message they couldn't ignore. Let them see how it feels to be boxed in. Let them understand what it means to take from someone who built the ground they stand on. At dawn, I rolled the gate out of my workshop. It was a solid frame, steel core wrapped in timber planks, weather sealed, and built to withstand more than bolt cutters or brute force. I'd designed it months ago, when I first got wind of the HOA's antics, but I never thought I'd actually use it. By 9 a.m., it was installed across the entrance to the bridge. A heavy-duty industrial padlock clanked shut on the latch. Then I affixed a sign, printed in bold red ink, "Private bridge. Access revoked trespassers. Will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." No warnings, no footnotes, just clarity. Didn't bother hiding. I knew they'd see me. Knew someone from Whispering Pines would try to come through that morning like clockwork. Sure enough, at 9:15, I heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. It was Sheila. She stopped her SUV a few feet short of the new gate, climbed out like she'd just discovered a body, and marched straight to the sign. She stood there a moment, lips moving, rereading it as though repetition might soften the message. Then she turned toward me, arms folded. "You're making a mistake," she called across the creek. "No," I said. "You did. You're cutting off access to 67 homes." I shrugged. "Should have thought of that before you blocked my road. You can't just." "I can. It's private property. I built the bridge. You've all been using it with my permission. That permission's now revoked." Her voice sharpened. "You'll be liable for obstruction. There are children, elderly residents, emergency services. I left space for an ambulance. There's a turnaround just before the gate." She hesitated, clearly thrown off. "I'd thought of everything. I always do. You'll hear from our legal team." She spat finely. "Good. Maybe they'll be more polite." She left in a hurry, tires spitting gravel, her SUV kicking up a cloud of orange dust that hung in the morning air like smoke after. A controlled burn. By noon, I had visitors. First it was Greg Toller, the HOA vice president, an insurance adjuster who played peacemaker when Sheila's iron-fisted diplomacy failed. He came with pastries. I met him at the bridge. "Come on, man," he said, offering a sheepish smile. "You've made your point." "I'm not making a point, Greg. I'm setting a boundary." He sighed. Okay. Look, the boulders were excessive." That was Sheila. She acted unilaterally. "Some of us didn't even know until yesterday. We can get them moved." "When?" "Next week. Maybe sooner." "Not good enough." He blinked. "You're serious." As a thunderclap, that night, Whispering Pines went quiet. No one passed through the bridge. Porch lights flickered on early. Cars sat idle in driveways. For the first time since that HOA sprouted like mold on a damp beam, they felt what it was like to be on the outside looking in. By morning, panic began to ripple. The community chat boards, normally buzzing with lawn care tips and casserole recipes, erupted into chaos. I watched the posts through a dummy account. Sheila tried damage control, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Some supported her. Most didn't. "I have a medical appointment," one resident wrote. "What if there's a fire?" Another asked. Why did we ever give that man a right of way? They were starting to realize I wasn't part of their utopia. I didn't want to be. I wasn't a lawn-mowing, HOA dues-paying cog in their sanitized machine. I was a man who lived by the old rules. Build what you need, mind your own, and treat people fair until they stop treating you the same. By the third day, the mayor's office called. A young intern tried to reason with me, said they'd received share community concerns and wanted to facilitate dialogue. I told him to read the property deeds, then hung up. The real tipping point came that afternoon, when a thunderstorm rolled in fast over the hills. Sheets of rain battered the rooftops. Tree limbs snapped like brittle twigs. The power went out across Whispering Pines, and the only crew capable of restoring it was stuck on the other side of the bridge. My side. I watched from my porch as flashlight beams scattered like fireflies across the far hill. No one crossed, because no one could, and still, no apology, still, no accountability. They'd tried to box me in, but now the gate was theirs to stare at, and I had the only key. By day 4, Whispering Pines looked less like a gated community and more like a stranded cruise ship. I saw them every morning, residents pacing with cell phones raised to the sky, trying to eke out a signal strong enough to call someone who might care. Cars lined up at the gate, like rush hour ghosts, idling, backing up, and pulling away again when the reality settled in. Still no one had apologized. Still no sign of the boulders being moved. But now there was fear behind their curtains. And fury. That afternoon, Sheila returned, but not alone this time. 2 sheriff's deputies followed her up the gravel road, boots crunching in rhythm. I watched them from the porch, sipping black coffee as the storm-swollen creek gurgled under the bridge. "Mr. Langston," the taller deputy called out. "That's me. We're here to discuss a complaint filed by the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. Sheila sent you then. She claims you're unlawfully obstructing a public access route." I stood, slow and calm, and pulled a folder from the table beside me. "Here's the deed. The bridge is on my private property. Built it myself. Paid for every nail. You'll see the easement ends 40 feet before it even starts. They've had access because I allowed it, not because they owned it." The deputy flipped through the pages. The other one nodded. Sheila, however, was fuming. "This is a public safety concern. What if there's a medical emergency? He's being vindictive." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean like when you dropped a ton of rocks on my only access road?" The taller deputy sighed. "We can't force him to open the bridge, Mom. The documents are clear." "But, ma'am," he cut her off, voice firm now. "You're not on your property anymore." She backed away a step, red-faced, arms rigid at her sides. "You're all making a mistake." "No," I said quietly. "You did." They left without another word, and the gate stayed locked. That night, things changed. Around midnight, I heard the unmistakable sound of tires on gravel. Slow, deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard. I killed the porch light and slipped into the trees with my flashlight and a pair of night vision goggles I kept for tracking deer. 3 figures, dressed in black hoodies and gloves, huddled near the gate. One held bolt cutters. Another carried a crowbar. They were trying to break the lock. I stepped closer through the underbrush, silent as fog. Crack! The bolt cutters bit down on steel and bounced off with a clang. Hardened shank. Industrial grade. They tried again, whispering curses. Still no luck. That's when I flicked on my flashlight and aimed the beam straight into their eyes. "Evening," I said, calm and cold. Panic. One dropped the cutters. Another stumbled backward and fell. The third ran without looking. I caught a glimpse of their faces. 2 teenage boys and a grown man I recognized from the HOA meetings. Frank Delaney ran the landscaping committee. "Frank," I said, stepping into view. "Trespassing's a funny thing when there's 3 witnesses." He raised his hands slowly. We didn't mean any harm." "No? Then why bring tools?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The next morning, I posted security footage of the attempted break-in. Grainy black and white clips, pulled from the motion-triggered trail cameras I'd installed months ago. I uploaded it anonymously to the Whispering Pines community board under the title, "When the HOA Sends Burglars." Instead of an apology, the post went viral within the hour. Residents were furious, not at me, but at the HOA. The board scrambled to do damage control. Frank resigned by midday. Parents started questioning Sheila's leadership. People demanded a vote to dissolve the current HOA board entirely, and still, the boulders remained. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, casting long shadows, across the bridge, a small procession approached from the far side. Dozens of residents, shoulders hunched, shoes dusty. At the front was a woman named Maria Gonzalez, one of the few board members who had always treated me kindly. She stopped. At the gate. "Mr. Langston," she said, voice trembling just enough. "I'm here to ask, no, to apologize. What they did was wrong. Sheila was wrong. We all let it happen." I studied the crowd. Tired eyes, regretful faces. No signs, no pitchforks. Just people, neighbors, caught in a war they hadn't chosen. I nodded once. "Come back tomorrow with a crew to move the boulders," I said. "Show me you mean it, then we'll talk." A breath of relief passed through them, like wind through pine, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the tension ease. But the fight wasn't over yet. At sunrise, I stood at the edge of the bridge, watching the horizon shift from bruised purple to fire orange. For the first time in over a week, the path felt quiet, not in the way it had when Whispering Pines turned its back on me, but in the way a storm finally passes, leaving broken branches and clean air behind. At precisely 8 a.m., I heard them coming. A flatbed truck rumbled up the winding gravel road, followed by a convoy of pickups and SUVs, shovels, gloves, work boots, not just laborers, residents, families, teenagers, a few elderly men with sun hats and folding stools. It was everyone. Maria climbed down first. She looked different today. Hair tied back, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, no clipboard in sight. "We're ready," she said. "No press," she smiled faintly. "I figured you'd prefer action over announcements." I unlocked the gate. It swung open with a soft creak, more dramatic than I intended, but fitting all the same. Like the final curtain rising on the last act, they marched down the path together, talking in low voices, eyes wary but focused. When they reached the bottom of my hill, they saw the obstruction. 4 boulders the size of small cars, wedge-like, a medieval blockade across my old road. For a few moments, no one moved. Then someone grabbed a crowbar. Another rolled up their sleeves. It began, not with speeches or orders, but with sweat and strain, a communal effort that should have happened long before. Hours passed. I joined in, of course. It was still my road. By noon, we'd shifted 2 of the 4 boulders. A backhoe they'd rented arrived and made quick work of the rest. The last stone fell with a thud into the soft dirt, and just like that, my road was mine again, open, unobstructed, and owed no favors. I dusted off my gloves and turned to Maria. "It didn't have to get this ugly," I said. She nodded. "But maybe it had to get this real." Then came the vote. With the road cleared, residents gathered at the Whispering Pines Community Hall, same building where Sheila once ruled, with her binder full of citations, and a voice sharper than barbed wire. But today, the crowd looked different. Tired of the fear, tired of the fines, tired of feeling like prisoners in homes they paid for. I didn't attend. I had no interest in HOA theatre. But an hour later, a small group returned to my cabin, Maria, among them, flanked by a man I didn't recognize. Older, grey at the temples, wore jeans, boots, and had the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove himself. "This is Tom Braddock," Maria said. "He's the new HOA president, just elected, unanimously." Tom extended his hand. "I served in the Corps, retired a few years back. I know how to lead without pushing people around." I shook his hand. "Sheila?" I asked. "Resigned. Effective immediately." Nobody clapped. Tom shifted his weight and cleared his throat. "Langston, I won't pretend we didn't make mistakes. Hell, the whole system's been running like a crooked engine. But if you're willing, I'd like to reopen the bridge. On your terms." I looked at him, then at Maria, then past them toward the community I'd been cut off from, scorned by, and finally acknowledged by. "I'll put it in writing," I said. "You get right-of-way access. Conditional. You mess with my land, I close the bridge again. No warning." "Fair," he said. We shook. 2 weeks later, the new agreement was official. The bridge reopened. A fresh sign went up. Not threatening, not angry, just clear. Private property. Use with respect. Trespassing void, reopener. That's all it said. That's all it needed. Since then, things have been quieter. Not friendly necessarily, but civil. And that's more than I ever expected. They still mow their lawns in perfect lines, still host bake sales and neighborhood barbecues. But now, when they wave, it's not out of obligation, it's out of something close to respect. Even Sheila, last I heard, moved out. No farewell party, just silence, like a bad storm finally moving off the radar. I still live in the cabin, still walk the trails, tend the garden, patch the roof when it leaks, and every now and then I stand at the edge of that bridge, not to guard it, but to remember that a man's land is sacred, his word stronger than bylaws. And sometimes the only way to win peace is to hold the line until the world remembers how to earn it.